I want to give my bit on Lost's season finale. Now, I know this is not my typical format, and I hope that my viewers and subscribers don't mind that I take a slight break from technology and get into some of my other passions, Lost being one of them. There are going to be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the season finale, I'll give you 5 seconds and you can move on. Also, if you're not really interested in Lost or what have you, hey, I don't mind you clicking away and watching some other video or doing something else. Okay, 24 hours ago, if you asked me what my immediate reaction of the season finale was, I could tell you that I was extremely angry, frustrated, I felt cheated, and empty. Now, 24 hours later, I'm a lot calmer, but I'm still in the camp that did not like the season finale. Now, I've scoured a lot of the internet and forums and read a lot of the reviews, and there seems to be two camps. Those that really appreciate the emotional closure, and those that are in the camp that wish that there was quote-unquote intellectual closure, that being the mythos and a lot of the tech and science behind the show that actually had almost no answers given. It is my opinion that you cannot separate the characters from the main character being the island. I understand that there are statements saying, well, it's about a character development, but the problem is that the character development is entirely dependent upon the variables of the island. If we were to take this in a non-fiction role and really do a case study of characters, we'd have real physics and laws and govern us in our everyday and reactions, and then we could follow their behaviors. But within Lost, we're dealing with a fictional realm and everything is speculative. Nonetheless, you can abide by a set of rules. So if we're really doing a character study, it's at the whim of the authors, and quite frankly, much of the island intervenes, indirectly affects the characters' behaviors. So seasons 1 through 5, essentially, we have adventures really dictated by direct intervention of the island and complete and utter manipulation of the events, whether it's Dharma, the others, the men in black, whether it's Jacob, the temple, you name it. All of it directly affects and creates these wonderful adventures within Lost. So while I know that there is always, and it was a great emotional closure, a lot of people enjoyed seeing a lot of the reunions and Jack and Kate getting together, there's a lot of relationship type dramas out there that essentially you could take a character study and replace all of that wonderful detail and uniqueness that was lost from Numbers to Smoke Monster, whatever, and just replace it. Okay, put them on a cruise ship, put them in a western, put them in some sort of neighborhood, do whatever. There was so much detail involved that directly manipulates and affects the characters that just having emotional closure is not sufficient. So yes, I know many of you would go, oh, well, yes it is, and it's all about the characters, and it doesn't matter this and that, and maybe some of you will say, oh, well, you're arrogant enough to think you're better than writers. No. I admit I'm a viewer that appreciates great writing. I recognize it. It hooked me in. And I'm not an easy sell. I admit. My passion would not exist if I did not actually have appreciation for the show. And I think a lot of the critics that don't like the finale do have to come to terms with, well, the passion exists because you did really enjoy the show. I'll get back to like this emotional closure. My wife also watched Lost with me, and she did ignore some of the very, very fictional parts of it. But she did come to terms in liking the smoke monster and wanted to find out those things. She just didn't like a lot of the time traveling things and flash forward, flash sideways. She preferred to always be in real time and appreciated the real time adventure. But she brought up a great point. And when I get to her point, I want to clarify that we understand the season finale, because I know there's great disputes of, well, people just think it's all purgatory and all this and other stuff. No. And if I'm wrong, then feel free to let me know. But the way I see it is that everything really did happen. The island's real. All the stuff that went on the island is real. All the deaths are real. The experiences are real. What have you. What the 6th season was showing was this alternate reality, if you want to call that purgatory or limbo, a stationary place, what have you. that when a character dies, they go to this alternate reality that actually has no place in a linear timeline. So, an example is, well, Jack dies on the island and goes to alternate reality and sees everybody there, and everybody's like, well, how is that possible? Because the Ajira flight leaves the island, and Sawyer and everybody else on the plane go on to live. Of course, they eventually die, though. And when they die, they go to this place. So this place obviously stretches perhaps all of time. And therefore, when you die and go to this alternate reality, you're there capable of seeing everyone else there. The plane wreckage at the end, after the lost title, was a mood setter from now what I'm reading in articles. In other countries it didn't quite have that, so that has no bearing in it, and everything being a dream and all this other stuff that I know. So yes, everything was real and we understand this alternate reality. My wife brought up a good point, though, just for the emotional side of the closure things, is that, well, Sawyer and the rest of the characters that were on the Ajira plane go off and to live beyond Jack. And yet all these souls meet in this alternate reality. My wife didn't like that ending. Yes, it has some emotional satisfaction for many, but my wife didn't buy it. She didn't like it. She's like, oh man, why do they have to be dead to meet each other? Things like that. And she would bring up other points and saying, well, what happens if Sawyer fell in love with another woman, had children with her? She's not going to be able to go to this other place with him and that, and he actually lived his life without finding somebody else, and always all of a sudden there for Juliet. She didn't like Said being with Shannon. Okay, what have you, the writers did what they did, and it is done. So, yeah, 6 years there, and we have a lot of disappointed people, and we have a lot of satisfied people. I, for one, look at both whether you do like and appreciate the emotional closure. I do think, and kind of agree with my wife in that there is some cop-out to them meeting as souls and things like that, versus all the detail that came before it and how lives were governed and cause and effect and things like that. And the total letdown on the mythology and that which basically the characters have nothing. There is no merit without the main character, the island, having no explanation whatsoever. Now I know some people say, well, it's just Jacob and his twin brother, he falls into a well and the smoke monster, this and that, and boom, that should be enough for some people. That's great. But for a lot of us, we expect a little more explanation from it. After all, there was finite details. The producers and writers went as far as to make alternate realities that many people could participate interactively, what have you, from Lost the Experience, like Find 815, and then the Dharma, and all this other thing. So a lot of people can't argue that there wasn't a lot of detail put into it that just faded and fizzled towards the end. I look at Season 6 as a sub-story that had attachments to Seasons 1 through 5, and the season finale being the conclusion of that sub-story. Lost was geared in such a way that it would and did answer a lot of questions, pose new ones, but they all were dependent on the main fulcrum of what is the island. You have some explanations, but for a lot of people not satisfactory ones. I would have preferred that things be made clear, and I don't like the open to interpretation. I do think many times when the artistic notation of, well, it's open to interpretation, many times is a cop-out. There are many books that I've read that get in specific detail from start to finish, and hey, if you like the book, you like the book. If you don't, you don't. Having, well, this is not answered and it's up to you. Well, no, I get involved in something because I trust the writer to take me from point A to point B, basically. Again, these are my opinions, and I respect anybody's opinion. Then people are asking, well, what would I have liked to have seen? Well, let's go to the campfire where Jacob's ashes were burning in the fire. When it fizzled, he'd be completely gone. Right there would have been a great point in time to give a short version, because Jacob obviously was on limited time and he had to go through the whole candidate dissertation. But he could have been there. Like Jack could have said, well, hey, why is this so important? And Sawyer giving some smart-ass remark. Yeah, you know, this and that. And Hurley giving a Star Wars reference, what have you, to getting there. And Jacob could have easily said, well, look, I know that you've noticed there's a lot of ancient ruins here and this and that. I don't know everything about the island, but from what I do know is that there was a highly intelligent civilization here that was so powerful that it manipulated many things within nature and animals and weather, what have you, and used many of the magnetic forces that are super strong within the island. They got too arrogant and began to think of themselves as gods and such, and used more of their technology and punctured a hole in space-time. Or I could have used a more layman's terms from that if people don't want to get too geeky. And this rupture leads to that which creates and destroys life. And via the rupture, many bad things came out, and many good things came out. And in that process, their civilization was for the most part destroyed. And those that remained found a way to plug this rupture, and therefore bottled it all up, both the life-generating and life-destroying source, and therefore ended a lot of this earlier conflicts and things. And they passed on to generations to protect this island, always trying to keep it a secret and to prevent any other civilization from tapping into it, because it was such a dangerous thing to obtain or use as a weapon, what have you. It could go into any number of things. And that the island constantly keeps you there in order to, in part, enforce secrecy, and in part, use the character's attributes to help put an end to this old conflict, which is between Jacob and his brother, which many would dub as good and evil, but I like to say opposition of ideology, because sometimes I like a twist where you think something is good and something is evil, but yet it reverses roles, what have you. In that many of the main characters' attributes, like Hurley's compassion, Jack's newfound faith, what have you. And there could have been another short dissertation, or like where Hurley would go, dude, So we're on the Atlantis, and so you could look at him and say, Tiny, we don't have all day, something, I don't know, something like that. And because I do think Lost has a lot of parallels to Sir Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, which is a fantastic book that I do enjoy. But then Jacob could have gone in and say that Dharma was getting too close and had no way of taming what they were tapping into and needed to be shut down, so on and so forth. There could have just, those things would have been sufficient, and that when the man in black, Jacob's brother, went down there, that which destroyed life destroyed his brother, essentially. And part of it escaped because this system that the ancient civilization did provide is not foolproof, and thus requires guardians of some sort. So that would have been something really cool, and the magnetism could easily, through science fiction, explain how at the island it could do this puncture because of this super magnetism, so on and so forth. Now, I will admit that when I was watching the season finale, I originally thought that the reality that we were watching, the alternate reality that we were watching, was askew from the timeline from the bomb, and that when Hurley was given the title of Guardian of the Island, that was his doing to sort of reset things. That his compassion is what brought everybody back together. And I thought that the island was trying to bring people back, because you're not allowed to escape the island. Once you're there, you're part of it, and or the island is done with you, with extreme exception, basically. So I did think this alternate reality at one point, because I was desperately looking for something other than what I was seeing. Although I didn't know that it was going to be the Souls thing, but I really did think this alternate reality was something created with the power of the island and Hurley to put everything back right. I mean, it fit his personality. So what is done is done, and I will say that I did enjoy the ride. There was many times that you're just on the edge of your seat, and I can't take that away. It was a great enjoyment. I just wish I had the closure that I and many others would have liked to have seen. And so I conclude in making a request to the producers and writers that in some form or fashion, whether it's a DVD extra or a special show or interviews, podcast, whatever, that you provide a lot of the answers and closure that many of us are searching for. Not everything has to be answered, but I certainly would like to know what was on your minds from all the wonderful detail that you provided within the entire series. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks for watching, and namaste.